George Forster, Barbara Bianca, and we're interviewing Amy Skillman today on May 5th, 2016. And Amy, tell us a little bit about yourself, starting out where you grew up and your family and such.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to participate in this project. I don't know if I have a lot to share, but I'll tell you at least a little bit about my own experience. Just personal background, I grew up in Michigan in a family with 4 brothers and 2 very romantic, very active, very adventurous parents, which was a blessing because I think it gave me the freedom to be adventurous myself. So we grew up on a small lake, so I spent most of my time outside. We were outdoor family, pretty much. Both my parents have passed on now. My brothers are all still alive and all happily married. And so now I have, each of them has 2 children. So I have a number of nieces and nephews, and a couple of grandnieces, yeah, a couple of grandnieces, 1 grandnephew. Yeah, wow, that's kind of.
Any of them close enough to get to quickly?
No, so most of my brothers still live in Michigan. 1 lives in California. I actually ended up going to graduate school in California at UCLA. So that sort of opened the door for, a parade of my brothers to kind of come visiting me. And 1 brother lived out there for a number of years and then moved, and the other brother moved out there and lived for a couple of years and moved back, and then we all left California, and then the youngest one now lives in California. So it's great for me because I get an opportunity to continue to go back to LA, but everybody else lives in Michigan, except for a nephew who lives in Minnesota with his family. So I grew up in Michigan, yeah.
And so you described your parents as romantic. Tell me a little bit about
Yeah, they were very romantic. They, my dad was always coming up behind my mom when she was working in the kitchen and just squeezing her and kissing her. And they threw parties. They threw a lot of parties. We lived on a lake, and there were a number of families on the lake that were all best friends, including the kids at my generation, but the parents. And they would do, in the summertime, they would do these progressive dinner parties, which is really fun. One house would have hors d'oeuvres and cocktails, and another house would have dinner, and the third house would have dessert, and then the 4th house would have the after dinner, late night, whatever. And so they'd all get in their boats and go to each other's houses, and it was always really fun. It was, they were very playful. And I remember one time we were hosting one part of one of these progressive tours, and I was, we were encouraged to be around, when our parents were having their parties, and they were all out on the porch, and I put on, my mom's name was Sally, and I put on the song Long Tall Sally, and my dad heard it, and he was so funny. He just jumped up and grabbed my mom and started dancing with her and singing along. My dad was actually a drummer in a jazz band before I was born. So we also grew up playing with his drum set, which we weren't allowed to do, but we did. We snuck it because it was a great drum set. And kids love pounding on things, right? So they danced a lot, and they were married 53 years until my father died. And, even at their 50th wedding anniversary, they were still just very romantic. And they had rough spots, they definitely had rough spots, like all relationships, all marriages. But.
And did they have creative type careers?
My mother was incredibly creative, but her primary career was raising 5 children. And we had dogs and cats and any stray animal that one of us would bring in, and she'd let us help, nurture it back to good health and let it go and that sort of thing. So we were always having things like that happening. But my dad was he was in the Navy in World War II. And then when he came back, he went to University of Michigan and got a degree in engineering. Did engineering, worked for a company that made, Michigan. So they made, I don't even know what it was. They made things that were for the auto industry, little things that would go into putting engines together and stuff like that. Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah. So they did that for a while, and then later he became like a consultant. People would hire him to rejuvenate their company. If the company was nearing bankruptcy or something like that, they would hire, my dad would get a contract to rejuvenate the company and bring it, and he did that. But so they would hire him as the president. He would be there for 3 or 4 years until it got stable again, and then he'd move on to something else. And
that's an interesting switch.
Yeah. Well, and interestingly enough, my youngest brother, that's what he does. That's his job. And my 2 middle brothers are engineers, one in the defense industry and one in the automotive industry. And then the oldest brother was the kind of the black sheep, other than me, in that he just wanted to play rock and roll. He went off to college and started playing music and even I remember dancing to his band when I was a kid when they would practice in the basement. But he went off to college and would rather play music than study. So after a couple of years of being at college, he dropped out and started playing music, and actually played in rock and roll bands for a while and won all kinds of competitions and things like that. And then eventually moved back to Michigan and worked in what did he do? He was manager of a hardware store for a while, and now he's retired. He plays music still. He plays in 2 bands, one for the church and one just out on Saturday nights with friends. So.
And the church figure into your lives?
Yes, actually, my mother was very spiritual. My grandparents on my mom's side were very spiritual. My dad hardly went to church, but he supported all of us going to church. He would go on the C&E holidays, the important ones. I grew up in an Episcopalian church, and I was very involved in the choir, and I also, my brothers were all in the boys' choir, and I was in the regular choir, and so I worked for, I take care of, if the boys' choir had rehearsals on Wednesday nights, I was there to help out with food or drinks or whatever, that kind of thing. So I was really involved in the church probably until my mid-teens, when I started feeling like there was an insincerity, I think, I felt like they really were going to church. I mean, this is so funny. I felt like they were really just going to church for the social aspect of church, The reception hour afterwards was as important as the service itself. And actually for a while that really bothered me, and it felt really insincere, and it felt like it wasn't really about belief. The irony is that, of course, now as an adult looking back, of course community is what church is all about, right? I mean, because you can be spiritual, which I have been spiritual all my life, totally on my own, walking through the woods or praying or meditating or whatever. You can totally do that, but the church is where you create community. And so it's ironic that in my adult professional life that which is, as a folklorist, very interested in culture and community and what creates a sense of belonging. And so, of course, church creates a sense of belonging. So, but yeah, I rejected that for a while, and just sort of followed my own spiritual path, which is probably more Buddhist than you know. But I'm still a C&E Christian, I guess, you know. I have those values, the Episcopal values, I guess, yeah. Yeah,
At what
so.
point in childhood or young adulthood, when did your identity become clear to you?
Well, you know, that's really interesting. I think I went to a girls' high school, an all-girls high school that my mother had also gone to. And my father went to the boys' version of the same school, which is how they met. They dated in high school, and then I think she rejected him for a little while, and then they got back together in college. But so I went to an all-girls school. I didn't really know anything about gay or lesbian communities, or I didn't, you know, that was completely alien to me. I do remember a distinct moment. My school was a boarding school, although I didn't board, so we had day schoolers and boarders. And I can remember, I don't even remember the details of it, but I do remember a moment probably in 11th grade when a light bulb kind of went off in my head that there was something other than a heterosexual dating opportunity. And I remember it was very hush hush, and it had to do with stories going around about some of the girls that were boarding together, that were boarding. And I didn't know, and it was somehow connected to a book that was, I don't even know what book it was, but a book was circulating among the boarders, and it may very well have been a book written by a lesbian, and was, sort of getting everybody excited about that, what those possibilities were. And looking back, now I've started going back to my high school reunions, and when I think about the couple of people, one in particular that was sort of associated with that discovery, she's definitely a lesbian. And in fact, the president of my class is Catherine Colbert, who is the woman who was the attorney for the Roe v. Wade case. And she's a lesbian, she's an out lesbian, she's been in a relationship for a long time, they have children, so it was definitely, the seeds could well have been planted then, but, so for me, I was definitely all about dating boys. That was what it was expected of me, and that's what I did. And in college, I think that my awareness became a little bit more in tuned. In graduate school, I went to graduate school at UCLA. I was still dating men at that point, but I remember that I had some very good friends who were gay, and one of my best friends and I, when we wanted to just go out and go dancing, we would go to the gay bars. We'd go to the male gay bars because we had friends that we could go hang out with, but we could hang out together and not worry about getting harassed by men. And when the two of us just wanted to go out and have a good time, we went to the gay bars. And we weren't in a relationship at all, and we weren't even exploring that, although I think many years later we had a conversation that came very close to that. But nothing ever came of it. And she's married, has a daughter, and I don't know if she ever explored anything beyond a heterosexual relationship. But I do remember that I felt very safe in that environment. At the same time, then those men became the men who started dying of AIDS. So long before I became a member of the LGBT community, I was very deeply impacted by, people who I lost as, friends that I lost as a result of AIDS, both in LA and in San Francisco, because some of them moved up to San Francisco. So I was very aware of that, and I think that started some of my activism, although I think my activist genes started much earlier when I was growing up in Detroit and experiencing the civil rights movement of the 60s and the Vietnam War. I think both of those really cemented a lot of my activism and my pacifism. But in terms of my own identity, I was 40. And And it was that I fell in love with a soul. I fell in love with a person, a woman. And it was so easy. You know, it just was easy. And you know, the fact that she was a woman obviously was significant, but not the primary motivating factor. It was her soul. It was the beauty of her soul that I fell in love with. And yeah, so I was 40. So, you know, and that was here in central Pennsylvania. I moved here in 1988. So I think I was 30, that would make me 36 when I moved here. I was born in 1952, so is that right? Yeah, so I was 35, 36 when I moved here. And still dated men while I lived here, but, you know, began to like meet people that were in the LGBT community here, and yeah, so.
So was there a point that your family became aware?
Yeah, so, okay, so the coming out story, right? So this is Bobby Carmichael that I dated for 12 years. And I fell in love with her. I still love her dearly. And so she and I wrote a letter to my parents. And when my mom got the letter, she didn't open it. Because she had already heard me talking about Bobby, like a lot. Like this was probably a year after Bobby and I started spending a lot of time together. So I think my mom knew what the letter was going to be about, and she didn't open it. She didn't want to open it. She didn't want to read it. She didn't want to know. I think my dad finally opened it, and my dad wrote me back a really beautiful letter. And my mom wrote me back a very angry letter. And I had written to them to say that I really wanted to bring her home for Christmas so that they could meet her. And I didn't take her. They didn't want her to come. I think that's right. You know, that's interesting. But they were, yeah, she didn't go with me that time. Oh, wow, that's really interesting. That I can't remember if she actually went. That's funny. So long ago at this point. It's like, what, 20 some years ago?
It's probably somewhat painful.
Yeah, true. So that we certainly do have selective memories, don't we? But I remember that I remember after, I'm sorry, I keep hitting the microphone. I remember after writing the letter, feeling like a huge weight had been lifted, and feeling that I could finally be myself for the first time in a very long time. And it wasn't just about coming out as a lesbian. It was also about, my mom and I in particular had battled over my identity anyway, not my sexual identity, but the way that I identified, that I was far less conservative than she, pursuing different, I had lived with a boyfriend for 8 years, and she didn't approve of that, even though she eventually came out and visited with us and that kind of thing. The thing that I will say about my mom, and this actually makes me cry, is that she's incredibly gracious. And that even though she wrote me a letter expressing her anger and her sadness, I think, when I did come home and when I did bring Bobby home, she was very gracious and very the perfect host, the perfect treating us as perfect as guests, especially just being really kind to Bobby. And eventually they were great together. I think my mom really grew to love Bobby. What's not to love about Bobby, right? But
She'd say it
Yeah, right. Well, she's funny, she's witty, she's smart, she's a problem solver. I mean, she's just a beautiful soul, so she's a good, really good person. And so my mom saw that. And it was interesting, my sister-in-law said to me later that if they had met her first, if they had met Bobby first, it would have been easier for them all. So I have 4 brothers. Once I wrote my parents and got their letters, I called all my brothers, which I probably should have called my parents, but I was too chicken. And so I called all my brothers, and my one brother, who's closest to me in age, was so sweet. He said, I've been worried about you because you've been alone for a while, and I am just happy that you're with somebody, that you have somebody in your life, So that was really important. And my youngest brother was the one that made the snitty quip about staying away from his children, which I think he was joking, but it still hurt, It was, just the fact that it even occurred to him to say it was very painful. And I think he's the one that had the hardest time accepting it. And then my other 2 brothers, they really could have cared less. They hardly had any comment at all, And so, and then they all eventually met Bobby and loved her, and she loves them, and they, yeah. So Bobby and I aren't together anymore, but they still. Well, they were pretty mad at her when we broke up, but they like her, they love her. So
you still see her?
Yeah. We split up for a while, and that was very painful for me. And took me a long time to get through that. And and I think that it's had a long-term impact on me. So, but yeah, now we're really good friends, and we do a lot together. In fact, I was talking to her on the way up here today. In fact, I just saw her. I had to stop and give her some speaker wires because she just moved last week, and I moved 6 months ago, and so our houses are really different, and so I have things that she can now use. So she gave me things, and yeah, so.
Another relationship of significance?
No, there was a woman that I spent some time with who was very interested in being in a relationship with me, and it was too soon for me. I couldn't do it. I tried. I really, cared a lot about her. She's now passed on. So there wasn't even really an opportunity to eventually see if anything would work there. But it was too hard for me, I think, to see myself with anybody else after. My relationship with Bobby was the longest relationship I'd ever been in, except for that with my family. So,
You said it was 12 years?
Yeah. So.
How were your parents when the relationship ended?
I think that's a really interesting question, how my parents responded, because my father had passed on, so it was my mom by then that she was very hurt that I was hurt. But it's interesting. I think this is still one of the challenges of, I don't know if this is true or not, but I think this is one of the challenges of gay and lesbian relationships is without marriage. Not that I am an advocate of marriage, but without that kind of legal relationship, divorce impacts families. It impacts families very significantly. It doesn't just impact the 2 people involved. And in heterosexual relationships, it's a little bit more frequent that I've seen that the family will step in and try to see if there's anything that could be done or could be worked out. And I know for Bobby's sister, when she divorced, her parents, got in touch with the guy and, tried to figure out how to help them make it work and that sort of thing. And my family didn't do that, and that felt a little bit like a loss for me. That they were very, very sad that I was hurt, but they weren't like immediately calling her up and saying, what's going on, and how can we. And maybe part of that is that we lived here in Pennsylvania and they're all in Michigan, so it wasn't a kind of every weekend in your face sort of relationship for them, so I don't know. That's kind of interesting, but it's an interesting question. To me, I did think about that. Like, is there a role for my family to play here in trying to see if we could try to work this out? And neither her family nor my family did that, so yeah.
Activism, did that happen before or after you met the love of I have chosen a career for myself that is a career that is engaged in activism. My graduate degree is in folklore, but my motivation for that has been when I was a child and a teenager, seeing inequities, especially played out in the African American community, in the community where I grew up, in outside Detroit and in Detroit, and being very aware of that. And so, even as a teenager, I marched in civil rights movements and demonstrations and things like that. And as a kid, I did a lot of volunteer work in organizations. That's part of the Episcopalian raising, I think, is to do volunteer work and to try to do good in your community and try to make a difference in your community. So I think my mom was like that, my grandmother was like that, my grandfather was like that. I grew up with that as a value, as a way of being. But it channels itself, right? So I had this experience in Los Angeles of losing friends to AIDS, and so whenever I could, I would try to participate in any kind of demonstrations or advocacy to help bring attention and awareness to that. I think I did some. I was involved in a concert at UCLA that was to raise awareness and money for AIDS victims. But then another concert that I did, in particular, was to raise awareness of injustices in Nicaragua. I remember working. Jackson Browne came to UCLA's campus, and I got to do the sound with his equipment, because he used his equipment. He donated his equipment to the concert, and then he came and performed at the concert. And we had other Nuevo Canción groups from Nicaragua coming and speaking. So I think my activism is definitely, it tends to get sort of shaped by, I did a lot of anti-war activism as well, but then, getting involved with Bobby and, being more and more involved in the LGBT community here in Harrisburg, several things. I worked for many years with an organization called the Institute for Cultural Partnerships. We were a nonprofit organization created out of the dismantling of a state agency. And our mission was to facilitate opportunities for understanding between and among diverse cultural groups, and we included in that the LGBT community. So we were doing, I think we were actually really involved in the, one of our staff members in particular was involved in establishing Baglia,
which was the youth organization before Common Roads. And then we worked very closely with Common Roads in its very early stages, both in, we meaning ICP, both in strategic planning, board development, that sort of thing. But also, probably one of my most, I know that there's a question in this protocol of questions about key moments in our lives. And one of them for me was actually working with Common Roads. We got a grant from the Princess Diana Foundation, the Princess Diana Fund and the Gill Foundation, to create a theater production around daily life, you working with LGBT youth. So I had a staff person at ICP who is a folklorist like I am, but also with a lot of experience in theater. And we contracted Bobby to come and work with us as well, to work with the youth of Common Roads to create a theater production. The theater production was called One Day. And actually, if there's no evidence of that in this archive, I should get you a copy of the video and a copy of the script. But so that experience was probably one of the most powerful experiences for me. To start to go on Friday nights to the Common Roads meetings, to hear the kids talk about their experiences, to hear them talk about daily pressures in school, daily harassment in school, that sort of thing, and then to work with them to create a script that would result in a 1-hour play that they acted in. And Bobby and Sally Vandewater worked really closely with them. I was more kind of the executive producer kind of person on the outside, because I didn't get to work with them all the time. But every possible chance that I could, I just wanted to be with those children, with those young people. I just wanted to be with them. And I'm not really sure if it was, I think partly it was about those times that they were together on those Friday nights, and I know they still do this, were safe and were all about love. And I think it was that love that drew me into those moments, and that, just that if we could just love each other, and on those nights we did. We just loved each other. And it didn't matter what your racial background was. It didn't matter what your economic background was. It didn't matter what your religious background was. In folklore, we study group affiliation, right? We study this what we call folk group, where you find commonality with people, where you have a shared set of experiences, right? So, and sometimes but we're all part of several groups. The three of us are women, right? So we're part of that group. People that, so all of those affiliations, you're part of several different groups, right? You're part of a religious group, you're part of an economic group, you're part of whether it's urban or rural or suburban or whatever, you're part of all these different folk groups where you share these commonalities. But sometimes the sum of one will take a higher precedent, will take a higher significance. And that could happen at any point in your life. It could change, from week to week, right? But so in those moments when we were working on that play, that shared commonality of being the other and fighting the battle against those who hate you, those who think you're disgusting, all of those things, fighting that battle and knowing the goodness and the love in those children, those youth, was incredibly powerful for me. Yeah. And yeah, so.
I'm sure it was a great help to them. Was the play put on at
Yeah,
the
so
major theater?
no, actually the play was pretty, let's see, where did we do the play? We did the play we wanted to do it in schools, and they wouldn't let us, right, because it was too controversial. So we did it in, we identified places in the community. And I'm drawing a blank on, I think we did one at Little Theater of Mechanicsburg maybe, or York Little Theater. And we did one, and we put it on several times. And then eventually, I think as Common Roads got stronger and stronger, and started developing more of the gay-straight alliances in schools, because the play is about a day in school. And it follows the lives of a couple of different of the kids, and they wrote a really great script. And I remember actually that probably a pivotal moment was the discussion. They had written in that somebody dies, somebody gets killed, somebody gets beat up and killed. They had written that in, and one of the most powerful moments was when, so the adults were saying, no, we can't do that. We can't put that in because it may diminish the opportunity for us to actually put this play on, and all the other things that you're talking about in here, the slights that you're getting, and the guy that bullies you, and these kinds of things are all very powerful. And if we put in there that somebody gets beat up and killed, we may not be able to, it may veto it. It just may make it too controversial. That was the adults speaking, right? But this was fairly soon after Matthew Shepard, was killed, I think. And so one of the most powerful moments was when we told the students, okay, that we're going to have a meeting on Thursday night or Friday night, the next time we get together, and we want you to tell us why you think it's important. And oh my God, the stories and the rationale that they shared with us about why it was important to keep that scene in, it blew me away. It makes me cry even now. It was so powerful, and so we kept it in. Yeah. So that was really amazing. Oops, that was really amazing. So that was one of those key pivotal moments. So I think that in terms of activism, were you going to ask another question?
No.
Okay. So I think the other activism that I feel really proud about is Bobby and I started with Amy Shestak, an organization called the Women's Circle, which was, there had been a couple of other lesbian organizations. I mean, part of why I feel a little not appropriate, and not like, I feel like I'm so new to LGBT history and activism in the central Pennsylvania area that I don't feel like I have that much to contribute. But there's HAWN, and there were other things that lesbians were doing in the area, right? There's the Lavender Letter, which was a newsletter. But Bobby and I both love producing things, whether it's concerts, festivals, retreats, that sort of thing. So we created the Women's Circle as a way to begin to create a consistent space for lesbians and allies to meet and to do things. And so we started monthly gatherings, I think we did for a while. We would have different thematic, we'd have a guest speaker or something, similar to, I think, what they're doing here now, yeah. But we actually, we created a nonprofit, we got a bank account, we did the whole 9 yards, and we were really excited about this. So we did, we would have guest speakers, we would have, cookies and tea, and, just gatherings and things like that. But the biggest thing that we did was a yearly retreat. And the retreat was always in the woods at Camp Shand in, is that Dauphin County maybe? Or maybe it's just the northern end of Lancaster County, I can't remember, but it's east of here. But it's a YWCA camp. And so it would be a 3-day event, and every year was a different theme. But the themes were really about empowering women and about providing safe spaces to express and explore who you are. And we had so many transformational stories come out of those weekends of, we would have art workshops, and we would have, we did everything from bringing, one year I brought Ruth Simons, who's an insurance broker, to come and talk about saving, and how do you save money, especially, if you're not allowed to have joint bank accounts or whatever, so we kind of did that whole range of things. And, but it was really around, I think, creating a sense of belonging, providing opportunity for women to feel a sense of belonging, to find themselves in each other. It was not a place to meet people and hook up. It was very retreat-like, very retreat-like. It was an opportunity for deep reflection. Yeah, personal enrichment, reflection, sense of community. We always ended with a bonfire and music. And one year we brought in a climbing wall and had and a woman who could run the harnesses, so that we could actually do climbing. And we did all kinds of stuff like that. That was just an opportunity. And we always had probably 40 or 50 women that would come. And I think 60 was the biggest, and we liked that because we didn't want it to be too big. We actually got a FAB Achievement Award for that one year, I think 2004. The only reason I know that is because I was concerned about dates for this interview, and I looked at I still have the award, and it said 2004. So we got an Achievement Award for that. I think for creating that opportunity in that space for women. So, yeah.
You mentioned the kids at Common Roads talking about their experiences of bullying. Did you ever experience any harassment?
No. And actually, I think that's another. When I came out, by the time I came out, I was 40. So have you read that book, Coming Into Our Fullness? It's a really beautiful book, put together by, I don't remember who put it together, but it's a collection of essays it's a collection of essays based on interviews with fairly well-known women, mostly feminists, who turned 40. So Barbara Meyerhoff's in there. I think Judy Chicago's in there. And Gloria Stein. There are all these people that are sort of my feminist coming of age generation that are in there when they turn 40. So, and I think one of the points of the whole book is when you turn 40, you've come into your fullness. You no longer have to prove yourself to anybody, right? So. I was in so I was 40, and somebody gave me that book as a birthday present, not Bobby, but a friend, and it was really, so I think I felt very much like I said earlier, I felt like I finally was myself. When I was able to come out to my mother, not only finally myself as a lesbian, but finally myself as just who I am. And no more needing to defend myself against anybody. So I think I had a real advantage over all these people that struggle with identity and angst as teens anyway, and then you add being gay or lesbian on top of that. I didn't have that. My boss was fine. I immediately was out at work. And I didn't feel. I feel really blessed this way and really lucky, and it may very well have to just do with the kind of occupations that I'm in. You know, I'm in with the arts community and with activism. I mean, you know, these are the sectors of society where being gay and lesbian is not unusual or not you know, really seen in a negative light. So I feel like I was really lucky that way. I didn't experience any of that. What's interesting though is that that others, that I see others, and I think even with Bobby, that there were residuals, because she, you know, was always a lesbian, that there are residuals, anxiety, residual mistrust, residual fears that carry forward, and I think sometimes manifest themselves where I don't think they're actually valid, you know, like I remember one time Bobby's mailbox got hit a lot. You know, it's a rural mailbox out in the middle of the country. I don't think those kids beating up on her mailbox had any clue she was a lesbian, but she did. And I don't know which one of us is right, but for me, I saw that as, you know, I saw that as this residual fear carrying into you know, current experiences. And I didn't have that fear because when I came out, I was an adult, I was in my fullness. And I just said, you know, this is who I am. And yeah, so.
Gay Pride Festival parade here in
Yeah.
Harrisburg, did you participate?
Oh yeah, a lot, definitely.
Because you know, I was a silent witness for some
Yeah.
years, and
I did that too once, yeah.
so there was a lot of protesting.
And yes,
anger
yeah.
for a while there.
Yeah. Yes, there was, and I did the silent witness a couple of times when what's his name came to town, the man, yeah, when he would come to town, I would, you know, I did the silent witnessing stuff as well, and you know, we had women's circle stuff at Pride for several years in a row, and I went to those, not so much in the last, I don't know, 8 or 10 years. You know, I think after Bobby and I split up, it was also there's too much pain, you know, the loss of, you know, to stay. I mean, I think I stayed peripherally involved in the LGBT community, but not as much as you know, when I was actually in a relationship with somebody. But yeah, so we did a women's circle things at Pride, and yeah.
This may not be as definitive for you, but you know, what changes have you seen in terms of acceptance?
Yeah. So I think the biggest change is what I experienced, which was, you know, coming out as an adult in the 90s was a whole lot easier than coming out as an adult in the 70s. And so I think there's a significant change that I experienced it, even though I might not have seen it. Not being in central Pennsylvania, I don't really know what kinds of harassment people were experiencing here. I was in Los Angeles, so you know, that was a little bit more open, but not always. I mean, Los Angeles has some very conservative neighborhoods and areas as well. But you know, I was thinking about that question because I think one of the changes that I've seen, and I think we still need to work on it a bit, but I think one of the changes that I've seen is a shift from it being about sex in the public mind to being about love. And I think that our efforts as a community and the activism and the advocacy around LGBT rights has really helped to make that shift. Because I think even in the 90s, when I came out, for the perception is that it's all about sex, right? And that it's about sexual promiscuity, not about falling in love with somebody. So I think that has changed significantly in terms of the public's perception. I think there's still a ways to go with that, but I think that has helped for our collective argument to be about love. Has really helped people, see things differently. The other thing I'll say is that when my niece was 10 years old, she came to visit me, and I was with Bobby, and she went and we went down to Bobby's farm, and we hung out on the farm for a weekend, and she was with me for a week, and then she came back the next year, and I have no idea if this is the classic, everybody has a lesbian aunt thing, but she is now a full-blown lesbian. And I think that for a while some of my family blamed me. I think that they thought that nobody ever said that to me, and nobody ever treated me as if that were my fault. But I know that when my niece did come out, that my mom was heartbroken. And mostly my mom was heartbroken for my brother, because he was going to have to now deal with that and explain it and live and figure out how to tell his family. And they live in a pretty conservative small town in Michigan. But she is very out. She's getting married this June to a woman she's been with for 10 years. They have one daughter that her partner birthed, and 4 more, possibly 5, that they've adopted and or are fostering. So they're in the fostering system, and they take children, but they also have had teens. Like they had one boy in particular who was, I think was 11 or something, and his former foster family kicked him out because he said he was gay. So they took him in for a while. So when I think about her opportunities, she's never been, coming out as a 20-year-old, she's never been shy about it. She's never been discreet about it. She's just very out. And I think that opportunity for her is very much due to all the generations that have gone before, the advocacy and the activism that has gone before to try to break down people's fears, fears of whatever they're afraid of, their own selves or something, I don't know. Yeah.
We're kind of winding down. You mentioned one thing before we started that you wanted to know if there was anything contributed to the archives, and I wanted to give you the opportunity to say that.
Oh, okay, yeah. So a couple of things. So Bernie Pupo, who has also been interviewed for this project, mentioned to me that he didn't know if stuff had been contributed to the archive from the Unity Festival, or if anybody had been interviewed that had been part of the Unity Festival, which was a precursor to the Pride Fest. And it took place for several years at Nikki's place, but I can't remember Nikki's last name. So somebody hopefully listening to this will be able to follow up with that. So there may very well be archival material from that. I did talk to Bobby before I came up here, and she thinks that she might have some stuff from HAN, the hanging out with, what is it, hanging out with the women, something or other, HAN, which was, I think, the precursor to the Lavender Letter. So she may have some stuff related to that. And she may have stuff from the Women's Circle. So I looked through my archives, but my archives at home are in the basement, and when I went down there last week, a snake fell out of the ceiling onto the floor. And so now when I go down to the basement, I wear a hat and a slippery jacket in case another snake falls. It'll slide right off me, but as a consequence, I didn't spend a lot of time looking in my collections, but if I have some stuff. The other thing that I did want to just be sure of is at the 10th anniversary of Common Roads, I was contracted to do a series of interviews with some of the founders of Common Roads, Sharon Potter, Steve Glassman, Melinda Ish, a couple of parents. I did like 8 or 10 interviews. And I'm pretty sure that I have given them to the center, but I would love if somebody could check and let me know, and if I haven't. So I did these interviews, and then I wrote an essay that was an introduction to a catalog. Maybe it was the 15th anniversary, because it was a catalog of artwork done by 15 gay and lesbian artists. And it was a catalog for an exhibition, and the exhibition was 15 years of Baglia Common Roads, 15 artists featured. And then what I did is I wrote a kind of introductory essay about the history of Common Roads, based on all of the interviews that I did. So the interviews were with some of the founders, with some parents, and with, I think I interviewed Chad. I interviewed one of the kids that had been in the Common Roads when I was working with them on the
founders, parents, and
yeah, I think.
hopefully they'll pick
So
it up.
I
will also email.
yeah. So the only reason I'm wondering if I didn't is because I did those on. I think I was trying to transfer those to a disc, because I think I did them on like a tape, a mini cassette or something, and I have I have the equipment to transfer it, and I remember doing that. I remember sitting there in the process of doing that, but then that got disrupted by other things happening at ICP, and so I just hope that I finished it, and if I didn't, then I would love somebody to let me know if I actually turned that stuff in, because if I didn't, then I should go back and see if I can find it.
Is there anything else you want to add about your journey?
My journey. I don't know. I think, yeah, I mean, I think it's been, how do I even say this? I firmly believe, ever since I was a child, I believe that one of the best ways I believe that stereotypes and prejudices and discrimination come from fear of the unknown. And so I think a lot of my professional world has been around breaking down that fear of the unknown. And I think that it's just like I said at the beginning, once you know one, it's sort of like my mother, she finally knew Bobby, and then all of a sudden now her granddaughter is a lesbian, so she had to kind of open up, and my brother and sister-in-law, who are the parents of my niece, my sister-in-law in particular, really struggled with it at first, but now she's like the biggest supporter, so I think that, getting to know, the fear of the unknown is what causes these discriminations. And once we can begin to break down the walls so that it's not unknown, but it's known, then we begin to break down those prejudices and those attitudes and that sort of thing. And so for me, being in a lesbian relationship has probably been one of the most educational experiences of my life. And just because it opened me up to a whole new world externally, and a whole new world of possibility for myself. and I think helped me understand the heart of love, what love really, like that, that energy that is love, that is in all of us, and that so I think it has been a really amazing journey. I have no idea where I'll go from here, but
Actually, that was going to be my question. Where do you see yourself taking that?
yeah. So right now, I am the director of a master's program in cultural sustainability at Goucher College, and I'm taking 35 years of breaking down barriers and trying to turn that into a curriculum that educates the next generation of doing that. So, so in terms, I feel like that's a life's work, of trying to provide those opportunities for people to open up and to see the other as through love, through, as a folklorist, I value and treasure our differences. I value and treasure the unique, or that's a terrible word, I don't like the word unique, but I value and treasure the important and distinctive ways in which we manifest our identities. And I think it's really important that we allow that to happen. So I don't want to say that we should all be each other and that we should all know each other and be the same at all. But there is this energy or light of love that sort of connects us all as humans on this planet, or in this plane, in this time moment. And that's what I get to kind of teach and talk about and build a curriculum around. So
Sounds like a great opportunity.
it's really exciting, and for me, it's like, oh my God, what a great way to kind of end one's career, is to be able to kind of look back on it and reflect on it and then turn it into something that is a way for the next generation to kind of move forward through it, And a big part, we talk about culture in the kind of common sense, the usual sense of, Ukrainian dance and Native American flute music and that sort of thing, but we also talk about the right to marry and, all of these other aspects of the other, or of, cultural distinctiveness that makes our planet the rich place that it is. It's similar to environmental sustainability, in that, if we all raise the exact same corn and our corn looks exactly alike, then one disease is going to wipe it all out, right? I think it's the same thing with humans. If we need to respect differences and that sort of thing. But yeah, so that's a kind of rambling way of answering that question. I don't know if you were asking it on a professional level or a personal level, but yeah, on a personal level, there's nothing. Yeah, it's about loving somebody, right? So I have no idea if I'll ever have another relationship. I have no idea what that will look like, but yeah. So I don't know if that's where you were going with that, but.
I was looking to take all the activism that you had in the chaos.
Yeah.
Where you saw that.
Yeah.
Like
So that's manifesting. Yeah, so the cultural sustainability program is specifically called cultural sustainability because sustainability to me suggests action and taking action. And our coursework, our courses are all about activism and all about teaching people how to use their voice. We all have a voice. So it's not about finding your voice. You have a voice. It's about how do you use that voice, and how do you use that voice in concert with others to make change on the planet. I think our planet is. I think there's a lot of illness right now, and yeah. lot of work to be done, not just in the LGBT community, but, and perhaps, yeah, I mean, I don't want to get into politics, but it's kind of scary. I know. I mean, yeah, you know, so that's really interesting, isn't it? That how drastically can progress be reversed? You know, I mean, it's an important question. How drastically can it be reversed? And it can. It does. It gets reversed. So we have to be ever vigilant.
Well, thank you.
My pleasure.
And for sharing with us and with the archives your oral history.
Oh, thank you.